Hey everybody, welcome to the Film Fan Club live stream through the Loki glass. I'm Sam Carrico, and John, you can kind of hear him already because it's a great title, you guys. I'm joined by John and Alex. How you guys doing?
Good, how are you?
Man. Yeah,
And,
doing good.
Good to hear. And Alex, first-time guest, good to see you. And thank you for joining us on Through the Loki glass. I thought it was such a fucking good title. I wrote it on the thing back there. Oh, you can't see it. Hang on. Where's my...
Did John tell you my suggested titles for your show?
Back there, Through the Looking Glass.
No, I don't remember what they were.
Well, now you guys
they're really dumb. Like Loki hyped on Marvel or Loki shade at Marvel. Just like, yeah, I don't remember exactly, but yeah, just using the term Loki in all the different dumb ways.
You can use it. So a friend of mine has a show called Loki's Midweek Mischief or something like that. And I'm like, that's fun, but I'm not going to say that all the time. So
yeah, that'd get hard to say.
It would be hard to say. So, Alex, we already talked about the first 3 episodes of Loki that, kind of introduced us to the TVA. Then the second episode introduced us to the female Loki. And then the third episode was on that meteor planet. Do you kind of want to fill us in on what you thought of the first 3 episodes before we get into the last half?
Yeah, I definitely, the first 2 episodes I would say I had a lot of fun with from what I remember, because it's been a little bit since I watched those. But it's like, it was fun to see like Tom Hiddleston back in this role, being Loki, and see what they were doing with it being not the Loki that we had known, because like this guy has only sort of progressed up till the plot of Avengers,
right?
He hasn't gone through the Thor: The Dark World stuff, and all the way to become sort of the character that we had known up until he's killed by Thanos. Spoilers, right. But it was so it's fun seeing how they played with that. I enjoyed the sort of like interesting, silly aspect of the TVA where he's going through all the different things, or that whole little bit where it's like, are you a robot or whatever, walking through that thing? And he's like, well, what if I don't know that I am? And he's like, just walk through so that all of that was fun. And I think, meeting Mobius, he became and was like my favorite character of the show. And I just loved Owen Wilson's sort of bureaucratic dismissal of Loki and just sort of like giving him a hard time about everything. So yeah, those first 2 episodes, I was having fun. I enjoyed them. So, like, I think they were sort of stronger than, say, like WandaVision's first 2, where I was like, what is happening?
I agree.
Sort of got adjusted into a world where I was like, oh, this is mysterious, but I'm not sort of left here being like, what is this show actually going to be like? What's it actually going to be about? But then I think I agree with y'all. The 3rd episode sort of lost a lot of steam when they're on that meteor planet, to the point where it's like, yeah, I sort of don't remember even most of what happened in that episode, even though I've tried to watch it a couple times. But overall, I would say, yeah, I enjoyed the show Loki. It like fit that perfect space of like something I can talk to my family about when we like catch up once a week. That wasn't, everything else going on in the world. It's like, oh, cool, yeah, we can talk about this show and like have a normal conversation, and don't have to talk about people still dying of a pandemic or whatever, so it was like, it fit that, which was perfect. Something I, needed, which was good.
Right. These whole shows have been, I talked about it in my episode that we did about WandaVision, that it kind of came in at the right time. And also the themes of the show dealt with like grief and loss and stuff. So I think it was an interesting thing to come in right at the pandemic. And they've had a Marvel show pretty much like every week. It's felt like a new episode every week this whole year. So it's been nice to have that experience. But one thing that I found myself getting hung up on was the 2 things in the first few episodes of Loki was the way it kind of speed runs a lot of character development for the character of Loki, and then also the way that the timeline stuff bothers like my understanding of the MCU. Free will basically hasn't existed to this point before the first episode of the show starts. So, like, what do you make of those 2 things, the Loki character development and then the timeline stuff? I'm just curious.
No, yeah, that's a good question. I would say just sort of like watching it, not having, when I watched those first few episodes, not and analyzing it like for a podcast, like I didn't mind the sort of rushed character development, because it sort of, Loki got to where he was, in the MCU by continuing to like realize that he's, I guess, powerless and like rely on sort of the relationship with his brother Thor, and then, he sort of gets a speed run through the dramatic stuff like losing Hera and all of those things. Right. So it's they did that quickly, but I also think, it may have just been for me that I wasn't thinking about that as much because I was familiar with the version of Loki that we had gotten through the longer MCU, And it was, I guess, also it's nice to sort of have to be able to get there without having to watch Thor: The Dark World. So,
yeah, I'll take a clip show of Thor: The Dark World over the actual movie any day. Yeah, I mean, one thing I found really interesting, and I was talking to you, John, before we started recording here, was whenever I rewatched the 2012 Avengers movie, whenever going into this Loki show, it had been a few months or maybe even a couple of years since I had seen that Avengers movie. And I was like, the Loki from the Avengers at that point in his life, pluck him out of that situation, he would never act this way, within 48 hours later, And then I found myself, when I rewatched it to prepare for this, this live stream, I found from watching the movie, I was like, actually, a lot of the stuff that the show explores was kind of there from the beginning. Like you think that he's just this intimidating force in the first Avengers movie, but really he's just kind of operating out of like a loneliness, like a deep-seated loneliness and kind of a yearning for some other purpose, outside of himself, but it manifests in the wrong ways. What do you guys? Either one of you could take this. What do you guys think of that?
I mean, I feel like I said that's what I thought it was when we talked about the first 3 episodes. I mean, not to be like,
John, you know everything.
Okay, we get it, John.
I just feel like I remember we were talking about it, and you said I don't like how it takes away the character development of Loki that we've seen up to this point. And I think I said, I think what I said was, well, it depends if you think that underwriting character stuff was there the whole time, or if he learned it about himself as the MCU progressed.
Right. And I still think there's something to be said about, they definitely speed run through it and rely a lot on the added context that they know the viewers have from watching Thor Ragnarok and watching Infinity War.
I mean, they basically just show Loki what we saw in the MCU. In regards to his actions.
They show him his character arc.
Right.
Yeah, but still, within 3 minutes, it's like, whatever. But the one thing the Avengers movie did reinforce was the episode 3, whenever they're on that train on the meteor planet, and he's just easily tossed around by human guards. Or even in the first episode of Loki, whenever he's easily tossed around by who we now learn, all the people of the TVA are just human variants. So, like, they're able to toss around this god of mischief who... Again, 24 hours before that, he was able to toss around human. It just doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, I'm having a hard time squaring that circle.
Well, yeah, that one I'd have to go back and watch because it's like obviously Loki doesn't have like any of his magic in the TVA realm. So does that
on the train? But on the train though.
Oh, on the train.
Well, that's a good point here. The TVA, they could toss him around. Yeah, I guess they're
right. Yeah, okay. That's what I thought about. But yeah, on the train, I guess. Yeah, but I mean. Because are those just supposed to be normal humans on that asteroid in the whatever century?
That's what I thought.
I mean, it seems to me like Loki is good at fighting whenever they need Loki to be in a fight scene, and bad at fighting when they need Loki to lose a fight scene to illustrate some point.
Yeah.
Which, and they do this thing where like Sylvie they like bill Sylvie as a better fighter than Loki.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Because Loki has magic.
As incompetent, though.
Right. I mean, like in that episode 3 fight scene where they're fighting their way through the guards, they're both kicking ass.
Mm-hmm. But there's a scene though where in like episode 6, I think, whenever they're like, "You guys have come all this way," and I'm like, they didn't do anything. They were losing and tossed around by other people this whole time. Then they stumbled here. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
What were you saying, John?
No, that was it. I said what I was going to say.
Alex.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like, on the one hand, it kind of fits perfectly within the character of Loki that they've designed to sort of be intimidating and, like, doing good, and then all of a sudden made to look like a huge fool. Like, that was the entire, like, last act of the Avengers movie was, Loki brings all this stuff in, but then he's made to look like a punk by Hawkeye, having that thing explode in his face. He's thrown around by the Hulk. Like, he's always been that kind of, like, butt of the joke character to where he's like, yeah, he can be intimidating, but then once they sort of get past that initial whatever, like almost everyone it makes Loki look like a fool
I just keep remembering that scene in the first Avengers movie where he like catches Hawkeye's arrow without even like having to look at it, and I'm just like,
yeah, but then it explodes in his face.
Oh well, you're right. Oh,
like that. Yeah, that's the point. It's like he does this thing that makes him look like a badass, but then he's also like,
but he's not
made the butt of the joke instantly
right.
after that. Yeah, almost every time.
That's a really good point.
Because it's like he's like, yeah, I've got these skills, but he's also so arrogant that like Hawkeye, got him with just an arrow that ends up exploding right in his face.
Yeah.
So
I would say overall the added context of rewatching the Avengers movie, I think helped my enjoyment of Loki. I think I like it. I like the show more now, which is unfortunate because then I don't think the show ever beat the cliffhanger of episode 2. Whenever she bombs the timeline with all those different devices, and it reveals, she says this isn't about you, and then it has that. I think that was a really good cliffhanger, and the show never really was able to match that level of excitement for me after that, which is unfortunate.
I think I liked episode 4 the most.
So let's talk about episode 4. What happens in episode 4 that you like it the most? They create that Nexus event. They're about to kiss on that island, and that's what makes the TVA come and I guess detain them. But they were on an apocalypse, and I thought they said nothing matters when you're on an apocalypse. So like,
okay, wait a minute.
Didn't they contradict themselves in that very moment?
Well, I think what they were going for was the same individual getting like romantically attracted to itself in the form of these two Lokis was such a crazy Nexus event that it even overrid that sort of apocalypse.
Okay.
Like do-over. I think that's what they were trying to establish with that.
Right.
Because that's like that because they talk about leading up to it, like
and stuff.
Try to we need to, can we create a Nexus event so they can find us? And she's like, oh, we're in the ultimate apocalypse here. We can't do that. So I think whether that, like, I would have to rewatch the episode, but whether it works perfectly that way, I think that's what they were going for, was the idea that their bond, manifesting in that look was even more powerful, that like it overrode the
established, like the fact that they were going to die.
The fact that they were all going to die. Yeah.
It was like, let them die on that planet though. Then the problem solves itself, right?
It's true, but
but if they hadn't died because they're, I don't know.
So
I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really remember. I think when I was watching that episode, the stuff where they're on the asteroid planet is at the very beginning, right?
Yes, that's at the very beginning. Then they get detained because they're about to kiss.
Right, and so once they get detained, like I remember leading up to the point where they're about to kiss and they get detained, being like, wait, is Loki kissing Loki going to like shatter time and space?
Yeah, kind of.
And then they caught them, and then after they caught them, they're back at the TVA and they're doing all the like emotional stuff about, not emotional, but like the deep dive into Sylvie and why she's doing it, and Mobius figuring out if the TVA is lying to him or not, and all that sort of subterfuge stuff. I thought was really cool. Yeah,
so John, that was I think my favorite arc of the whole show was Mobius going, because they did actually, for all the like that scene, I think, is it at the end of episode 4? We're kind of skipping around because episode 4 also introduces us formally to the Timekeepers, and Judge Renslayer is the TVA like main secretary lady who is like running things. It starts with her, going in that room, and it ends also in that room, and that's where she makes the decision to kill her friend Owen Wilson. And that scene where he talks about like, maybe like if I could be anywhere, I would be in my old life, maybe it was this. That was a great fucking scene. And then they go back by bringing him back in the next episode.
I mean, they pruned him, and I was like, they pruned Owen Wilson? And then at the end of that episode, they pruned Loki, and I was like, oh, well, they definitely didn't actually prune Loki, so Owen Wilson's fine, too.
Right. I know. That Marvel, they do that all the time, and sometimes it still manages to work for the brief moment that they let it work, because it really was. And I was like, oh, my favorite character. Why would you kill this guy? And then, a little bit later, like, oh, okay, cool. Hopefully he's not dead.
Death in this show or in the Marvel universe now means like literally as much as like in the comics or in like Doctor Who or something. Like you can literally like come back at any time.
I mean, it always kind of did.
But to a super degree now. Like remember when Infinity War came out and Thanos snaps Loki's neck and then he says to the camera, "No resurrections this time." And then it's like, oh wow, they actually like this movie's gonna have some impact, you know.
Which, like, on technicality, they didn't resurrect that Loki.
Yeah,
that Loki is still dead.
Oh, you're totally right.
We've got a time duplicate, you know,
yeah.
to borrow the Futurama phrase.
And the same
contract
thing with
loopholes.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it is one of those things. But and it's also, you know, it's like, not to jump too much into what we're talking about later. It's like, I think Black Widow is now forever dead. Like, she's not coming back. So they have
They're replacing her with Yelena.
Yeah.
Yeah. We won't get Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow back, but we'll get someone similar. You know,
Florence Pugh is totally a fine fill-in, I think, but no. So episode 4, Loki, I thought it was actually a huge slow point for me, but I did have the good reveal though of the timekeepers being robots. Yeah. So kind of take yourself back to that moment in time before we figured out the context. What did you guys think of that reveal? The time, you know, the what do they call it? The timekeepers? Yeah, being robots.
I mean, I always knew that they weren't going to actually be timekeepers. It was too obvious for the show to be like, oh yeah, it actually is a race of like 3 weird lizard aliens that control time and space. That was never going to be what it was. I thought it was going to be a Loki, like a Loki variant, pulling all the strings to make all the variants that get turned into the TVA drones so he could control everything. But having them be robots and then having the power behind the throne not be a Loki was refreshing, I think, because I totally thought, and this might be because I thought it was a contained series. If it's a contained series, then you want your villain to be something that says something about like your characters or whatever, right? So you have it be a Loki so that Loki can come face to face with his own power mad narcissism, right? But if it's a ever-continuing TV show that has no definitive ending, then you make it somebody who's not a Loki, because that's a little more interesting from a purely aesthetic, temporary standpoint, sort of thing.
Right.
But I liked the chopping off the head and it turning into a robot.
No, it was a fun scene. It reminded me of the throne room in The Last Jedi a lot, because isn't that what happens? Is she or no? Does it end with her chopping it? Is there a fight and then she chops the head off?
No,
or chop the head off and then there's a fight.
Yeah. Oh, in Loki.
You mean when they kill Snoke?
No, in Loki.
No, we're talking about Loki.
Yeah. That's what I'm comparing it to, though. Yeah, in Loki, though, is it the same order as in The Last Jedi, or is it the flipped order as The Last Jedi? Because in the Last Jedi, they kill Snoke. And then they have a fight.
I'm now not sure. Yeah.
And then I think Loki, I think they have a fight and then they kill the timekeepers, right?
Yeah. I think so. They sort of battle their way in, kill a timekeeper, which revealing that it's just a robot, and then battle a little bit more. Yeah. Yeah, and then Loki gets
and then cliffhanger. He's about to do the he's about to do the I love you thing, and then they right before
did y'all because for me, it was funny. It's like, you know, have the credits roll, and then in the credits, like the extended scene is Loki waking up and seeing a bunch of other Lokis, and I was like, man, you didn't even let me be concerned for a week. TV show, you told me immediately.
Yeah, I saw that on YouTube actually, because I didn't watch the post credits series, because I was like, okay, episode's over, turn it off, go about my day.
Right.
But then I saw like on YouTube it's like Loki episode 4 post credits scene, and I was like, wait, what? And it showed like all the other Loki. I was like, okay, and then so immediately I was like, why don't you put that? Yeah, either like wait, let us actually like be worried, or put it in the actual episode. Like I was confused.
Yeah, no.
I didn't even know that they had post-credit scenes.
Only some episodes do, which was the weirdest thing about all of the Marvel shows. It's because I would say go back to watching WandaVision. Like the first 2, I like watched through the credits, being like, "Are we doing anything?" And then no, they didn't. But then episode like 4 or 5 does have a post-credit scene, and I was like, "Well, what? When am I supposed to watch the credits, Marvel?"
Yeah, I hate that.
They put a little symbol in the top right corner of the credits.
I was like, just tell me when you're gonna have an extra scene. Yeah, because it's like y'all said, I'm at my house. I've got other things I'm gonna do. You know?
Oh yeah, exactly. And like,
if I'm watching a Marvel movie, you have a skip credits button, so I can.
Right. So that was episode 4. Episode 5 is Wait, go ahead.
There's one other thing I want to talk about in episode 4.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, your favorite.
They do the Sylvie backstory stuff.
That was good.
Where you see her as a kid.
It was okay.
And I really like that you see her go through the same. When Loki goes through the TVA stuff, he goes through all those processing points and their jokes, right? And then when the little girl goes, when Sylvie as a little girl goes through in episode 4, it is like, oh, look, these people are fascist monsters.
Right.
Who are literally going to kill this little girl for no discernible reason, because we still don't know what the Nexus is.
Well, that's in episode 4 too. Whenever she's like face to face with the girl, like we find out that the main like secretary who got promoted to being like the white. Renslayer. She asked. She was the one that tried to apprehend female Loki, and so then she's like, okay, well, what was the problem with me? Why wasn't I allowed to exist? And she's like, I don't remember.
I was wondering,
cool.
Were they just implying the fact that like the reason because I was trying to like figure that out.
I love that.
Yeah, well, I mean, but like, is the reason this Loki wasn't allowed to exist? Was it just because she was a girl?
I think that's what it is.
I think that's what they're trying to do a feminist
I think she
thing.
has. I think Sylvie has a line where she's like, I was born a girl, and then initially it wasn't that big of a difference, but as I got older, the variation in the timeline became more noticeable, and then they came to get me.
Is that okay?
And then they ruined the timeline.
Is that a feminist or transgender allegory there?
I mean, there's a bunch of stuff about it that's
it's
the suppression of
it's sort of
female the femininity.
You're right. Yeah. I think that's interesting. I didn't even think about that way. Yeah, the reason that she's a problem is just because she's a woman, and then you're not supposed to be a woman. You're supposed to be a man. And then she's like,
and it drives home how like aggressively fascist the TVA is, in that it's like literally they will prune an entire universe from existence because one person in that universe was born a girl.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
What did you texted me, I think, while you were still going through the episodes, John, and you're like, man, I hope that this TVA, this fascist element to the TVA, like pays off messaging wise. I think something to that effect.
I mean, there's a bunch of stuff like Mobius's arc, and the stuff that we learn about everybody's relation to the TVA, and also Renslayer. I think at the time that I texted you that, in the montage where Sylvie as a little girl is going through the TVA, and then she escapes by doing that weird arm twist move to get away from Renslayer as a Minuteman instead of a judge.
Right.
I feel like I saw Renslayer like nod to her, like to insinuate that they had like set up together that Renslayer would let her escape. And so I was like, oh, it'll be super cool if we see Renslayer, a judge within this fascist organization, have to deal with and confront the fact that she's been complicit in this entire thing the whole time. But then they pretty clearly make her just like full on bad guy. So I think I just misread like a dip of her head or something.
Yeah. I don't know.
And then Mobius gets to be that arc anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk more about, I guess, Renslayer's arc when we get to that final episode. But I did find it interesting, sort of her exit from the show and them using her as like the showing that like all of this is a lie to the other Minutemen. But like then that doesn't get explored more.
No, you're right. It doesn't.
At least,
we can jump forward just for a second though, because I'm trying so hard to remember the last scene we see of Judge. The last thing I remember of Judge Renslayer in the show is her variant. Is there something
okay? Yeah.
So
I don't remember exactly the order that it happens, but like Mobius is confronting Renslayer in the office, like as she's because it's like you get the
she knocks him down, right? He's made it all that way back to the TVA, and then he's about to stop her, and then she knocks him down.
So like she's just talked to the little clock thing after the clock thing is given the two Lokis.
Oh, and she said
the potential deal.
She's like, this will be more useful. The little clock thing is like, this will be more useful. And then what is that? What was that about?
Right. So I
was that for season 2?
Sure. Yeah. But so she and Mobius talk, and Mobius is like, you betrayed me, and she's like, no, you betrayed me. Like I still believe in the work. Like eons and eons of doing this, like I have to believe it was for a reason, which was kind of an interesting thing to do, that like she, still believes in this, like telling the lie, telling the, doing the horrific thing of like, just pruning people out of existence, because she's like, it has to be for a reason, all of this, like we can't just have been doing this, for nothing. Like there has to be something.
They have the two stand-ins, right? Of the two people when you're confronted with like an earth-shattering truth, like something like this. You have Owen Wilson who reacts one way, or her who like chooses like not to react.
Yeah, and then like has the one line that I thought was kind of interesting. She was like, "The only person that can have free will is the person in charge," and it was like.
It was driving home that fascist thing.
Yeah, I know. I was like, oh,
how
gross.
People buy into authoritarianism,
right?
You know, she's like that. No, she's not at the top, but she's been brainwashed in such a way that she's like, even though this doesn't,
or even just
literally doesn't allow me free will. That's okay because somebody.
That's okay because like there's a reason for this. There's a like there's a justifiable, rational reason why we've given up free will and do these horrific things. Which I thought, was an interesting choice, to have that play out with that character. But then they also have showing her just as a teacher at a school as like the way to convince the other Minutemen that they've been lied to, that they're all variants. But again, neither one of those get much explored other than like Renslayer when she walks through the final portal that she makes. She says she's going in search of free will and then just bounces.
Which that's what just whoever's in charge, right? Because she says the only person with free will is the person in charge.
Yeah, so I'm guessing that the information she's given is how to find, I guess, the original version or one of the variants of He Who Remains.
Right.
Yeah, probably. Probably the one that ultimately is supposed to become the one in charge again, sort of like the benevolent conqueror.
Who we see at the end of the series in that statue or whatever, Right.
Yeah. Well, that's the part that I was having trouble with is like because all I could think about when we get to this idea of all of the different versions, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. This is Rick from Rick and Morty, but there's a version of Rick that literally kills all of the other Ricks so that like the timeline doesn't get all chaotic anymore. Like that's who we're.
And it was kind of what John was talking about, right? Except you thought it was going to be Loki that does this. The one that creates. The only reason it's the sacred timeline is because it's the one that ends with this particular person in charge, right? Mm-hmm. Didn't we talk about that a little bit?
I thought that the version of Loki that we were following was being allowed to do what he was doing by whatever Loki runs the TVA, so that our Loki would be groomed, for lack of a better word, into taking his into like filling that role as the TVA Loki.
Yeah.
And our Loki was going to have to be like, oh, do I want to do this thing that gives me complete control over the entirety of time and space, or do I want to not do that?
They tried to give him that dilemma at the end of the show, and I don't think it was. We'll get there. I want to put a pin in this because they do try and put that dilemma in front of him in the end of the show, and I don't think it's earned at fucking all. I hate it so much because I hate I hate the whole last episode. But let's get there. Let's talk about something. I really like episode 5 though. So come on, like episode 5 was so fun. Richard E. Grant as like older Loki, perfect casting, and he's got a fun little arc there. Like
I think that's definitely my favorite episode. Just all of the different Lokis and them having to confront their nature, especially in that scene where it's like, the one Loki has betrayed this little band, this little trio to get the other Loki to come in, and he's like, all right, I get to be king now. And then that Loki's like, no, you don't. And then the other Lokis are like, no, you don't. Just like the constant backstabbing and betrayal of all of these variants.
That episode, I think, did the way better character development for Loki than I think the first episode where they try to speed run his character development. I think that 5th episode, getting there naturally and having him go through an event where he literally sees the faults of himself manifesting, in a way that he can actually kind of look at it. And he's like, damn, I really do need to change. And I bought that. I'm like, okay, I get that. Because it's not somebody, it's not, somebody, he who remains telling you this is how you're supposed to live your life, which we later found out in episode 6, part it kind of is. But, I love Alligator Loki too. So, I mean, like
Alligator Loki was amazing.
Yeah, John,
it was so much fun.
Episode 5, come on, John.
I liked episode 5. I think I liked episode 4 more than episode 5, but
I don't get that at all.
Old man Loki's arc, and we've already hit spoiler territory.
Well, this whole thing,
So when he dies and he goes glorious purpose, right?
So
and I was like that. I like the whole way up. I was like, okay, he's gonna die and sacrifice himself so that they can enchant the smoke monster or whatever.
The Thing, yeah.
You know, he's going to sacrifice himself so they can live because he's the most adjusted Loki. And I was kind of like prepped for him to die, but then he shouted glorious purpose, and I was like, oh shit. Okay, that got me now.
That's good.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, now I'm emotionally invested in his death. That was good.
It was really sweet. Yeah, they were able in that episode to hit the Easter egg quota. They were able to hit the fun quota with Alligator Loki. They were able to hit a little bit of the heartstrings in episode 5. I mean, come on. I can't get over how maybe now that I'm thinking about it, maybe that did beat episode 2. Episode 2, the ending of episode 2 particularly, and then episode 5. I think are like the high points of this for me, anyways. The high points of this series. What did you guys think of like Eliath and like the whole like the end of time and the whole setting?
I liked all of that. I again like to jump off of that. It's like I saying earlier. I liked all the different versions of Loki. I do like the fact that older Loki sacrifices himself, and that like you get all of them kind of learning. Oh, we're actually probably more powerful than we think. Based off of what. Yeah, that Loki, the older Loki does. I also really enjoyed that the king of the Lokis was a child, and they're like, what did he do? And he's like, I killed Thor. And you're like, oh, well,
all the
okay.
other Lokis just go.
Yeah. They're all like, oh, damn. Yeah. So
because we've seen
that was a fun moment.
Yeah, we've seen like 4 episodes or 4 movies now of him in one way or another casually or seriously trying to kill Thor or trying to best him, and he's never been able to. So for this, the best way to make this kid seem threatening is immediately like I killed Thor, and we get to see Frog Thor and the Thanos copter in that episode, and then President Loki. I thought President Loki was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I thought it was weird how the way that he convinced the other Loki to turn on our little group of Lokis was to be like, yeah, you bring me all those other Lokis and I'll make you king of this entire world that we're in.
Yeah, that was kind of dumb. That was kind of like if I was that Loki that fell for, I would have been like, hey, hang on.
Why would you believe that?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think that leans into sort of like the thing they're trying to mess with all of the Lokis, ours being the one that we've known the longest, and I guess, the quote unquote like smartest or close to it,
right,
is like that they all are just like still caught in that cycle of like, we're, I want power, and not believing that the people who are helping them gain power are going to betray them, but then also being like, oh, but I'll definitely betray you.
Right.
Like they all have that same blind spot that, the sort of the Loki we were kind of used to in the first Thor and then Avengers, that hubris, that arrogance, that belief that like, oh, I'm correct. I'm do all of this because I am who I am. So, I think it was fun to see that sort of played out quickly. And then like you were making me think of versus like the sort of speed run to get Loki to being a good, like the Loki we know in episode 1 versus like seeing it this. I think they do kind of like, I think they could have maybe done better with that in the first episode, but I do think that we still see Loki being more like the Loki that we saw in Avengers throughout the show versus than the Loki we knew in Infinity War or even Thor Ragnarok, because he is
I think
constantly
there's a lot of Ragnarok Loki in this show.
Yeah, well, what I mean is like the still betraying Mobius, like the still looking for the easy way out. You know what I mean? Which is like a Loki that we've dealt with. Yeah, but and then to like because he doesn't ever really make that transformation until the end of Ragnarok, where like Thor believed in him. Whereas in this one, he doesn't really make the transformation until he's confronted with himself everywhere, and his sort of growing fondness for Sylvie. So, I mean, it's like, I don't think it was handled perfectly, but I think it was like there. You know what I mean?
Oh, by the end,
the slow burn arc.
Yeah, by the end of this first season, I think they've achieved that. I think, but the way that I think they very much tried to, for the first episode, just kind of like, okay, we know this can't be the Loki that died in Infinity War, but we want it to be, so we're going to try to make it that to prep you for the show.
Yeah.
And then, but then whenever my thing is, I wouldn't have even, if I would have rewrote that first episode and not even have the flat, not the whole thing. Anyways, I would have changed it. The character development is done better like this. Show, don't tell.
Yeah.
Is my thing.
Right.
So, yeah. And I like that, and also random point, but I like that it's really sweet that Richard E. Grant used the distraction that he does is he recreates Asgard, where it's established earlier in the show that he hasn't been there in a long time. And the reason that he was plot from the timeline was because he tried to go back and he wasn't allowed to. So it was like a really sweet, really sweet payoff. Again, going to the fascist nature of the organization, taking away everything.
I also like how old man Loki sort of he sort of provided like
classic Loki.
An interesting commentary on like ourselves and our own better and worse natures, because when that other Loki sells them out to President Loki, and then so they're walking away and old man Loki is like, we're all shit, we all deserve to suffer because we're all bad. But then at the end, he's the one who sacrifices himself willingly to save the other Lokis who are trying to also stop the TVA.
Right.
And so it's this interesting, like, you know, even when we think that we are inherently, instinctively, naturally bad, we can still choose to be good.
Right.
Which I really like that sort of stuff in, I don't know. I like when the point of a media is to be like, hey, we can be better people.
Right. Yeah.
Despite what's thrown at you, you can make the choice to be better, and you know, like it's virtuous and all that stuff. But it's a good arc. Like I said, by the end of this first season, I'm like totally like, yeah, fuck yeah, good team, good guy Loki and whatnot. But I just that first episode is where I still think that he's still a little bit depowered in the show. He's depowered, but also kind of overpowered in the show. Like I didn't know that Loki could levitate things. I didn't know if that was established in like the Avengers movies, but like I'm rewatching that Avengers movie from 2012. There would have been a lot of moments where him being able to move things with his mind would have been really, really helpful. And he chose, I guess he chose not to, and it's established in this series that he can do that. But then also it's established in the series that humans can you know go hand to hand with Loki semi easily. So I don't know. So I guess this at first the first 3 episodes I thought the show was like total character assassination. Total character assassination. But now I'm like, there's some parts where I like, and some parts where I don't like.
Yeah, seeing sort of the full picture now, it's like, okay, I get why we did some of this to sort of
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also like, is there a way we could have done this a little bit better?
Yeah, probably. Another draft of the each episode.
Especially like I think John and I talked about this. I think y'all probably beat it to death last time y'all did. But the switch from Sylvie being the sort of like spooky, all in control, like 5D chess mastermind, to then to then her plan gets thrown off a little bit and everything's she's just a normal Loki. You're like, okay, that happened a little too quickly, I think.
That really bothered me going back to the second and third episode. Yeah, because in the second episode, she is like super powerful. Third episode, she seems really incompetent. And I'm like, it takes me out of it whenever I'm like, it's just what the show wants at that time.
Right. Because they have to humanize her going into them being attracted to each other.
But incompetence is different.
The audience.
Right.
But incompetence is different than humanization, I feel like.
Sure. But it is different, but it's an easy like shortcut to it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we could have ended up in the same space with an episode that like explored that more than just, oh, you idiot, we've ended up on Lamentus, Now we're
he seems so bumbling the whole episode because he's like, I accidentally made it. Oh, are we gonna die? Sorry.
You know what they needed to do?
Broke the thing.
They needed to do for that episode is like they needed to run into a couple obstacles. In one of them, our Loki should have failed and Sylvie should have succeeded. And then the next obstacle they run into, Sylvie's like, I'll take care of this. And then she fails in her way and Loki succeeds in his way. And that way we get to see that they're both competent. Yeah. No, they did the thing where they came to that lady's house. And Sylvie tried something and lost. And then Loki tried something and lost. So they both got outwitted by a lady who was resigned to die in her isolated shack in the middle of nowhere.
Which, like, that part to me was sort of a classic Loki moment of his, the whole, it's like the same thing. It's like catching the arrow, his hubris and then blowing up in his face. Like that moment worked for me as far as our Loki is concerned. But like, I agree, I think I think it works in sort of the rushed way of trying to make only 6 episodes explore the arc for both of these characters.
Right.
But it could have been done better and more, I guess, nuanced, as opposed to that sort of quick flip. Because, like, if you think, okay, they're all Lokis, then it makes sense once, like, her plan's thrown off, she's in that same boat as all the other Lokis to where it's like, I've got nothing now, they're bumbling, they're overly confident. Right. They're untrusting. They can't work together. But at the same time,
way better in episode 5.
It's such a dramatic shift in between 2 and 3, to where it's like in 2, you're like, oh my god, it's a girl, and she's like moving her mind between different people, like she's in control of all these different people, and like all of this different stuff's going on. You're like, oh yeah, that's spooky. That's a power we haven't seen Loki really use before, when he doesn't have like the Mind Stone.
Right.
So it was like, oh wow. And then in episode 3, again, it's like, oh, this, we're in the TVA, everything's going fine. Loki messes it up. Now we've ended up on a planet that's going to be destroyed. Yeah, and you're like, oh, what? Wait, what's happening?
Damn it, Loki. He's like, oops, bye-bye.
Yeah, he's like, we'll be fine. We'll sneak our way on here to this train,
By lying terribly, the both of them.
Yeah. Well, then the only
reason they get on that train is because those guards are absolute morons.
Incompetent.
Right?
Well, yeah. She charms her. Yeah. She like mind controls one. Yeah.
But the other one's like not looking.
Loki is just like wearing a uniform, and he's like, I have orders from somebody to take this person onto the train. And the guy's like, okay, but we still need your tickets.
It's very much like, kids in a trench coat to see a movie that they can't see, as opposed to like a manipulative god.
You're right. The god of mischief. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
No, but episode 5 was, so that was episode 3. Episode 2 was great. Episode 5 was great.
Right.
Episode 6, going into episode 6, what'd you think of the ending to episode 5, and what were your kind of feelings going into the last episode? With the castle at the end of time, what were your expectations? What'd you think was going to happen? Either one.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was kind of like John, to where I wasn't sure if it was going to be a Loki in charge of all of it, but it felt like that's maybe something that we're going to do. I was kind of in that like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen, but this is interesting, getting past the sort of guard dog of Eliath, and then, now we're going into this. And I do like the beginning of episode 6, that sort of, they're in the old mansion.
It's a good spooky vibe.
Yeah. The little clock shows up and like offers them like the best of all worlds kind of deal, to where it's like, oh yeah, Loki, you can win. You can kill Thanos. You can do all of this stuff. Yeah. And Sylvie, you can be there too. Like, y'all can share a timeline. We have the power to rewrite reality.
Right. I thought that
I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of interesting. And I was glad, obviously that like Sylvie was like locked in, but I also like the look on Loki's face when they're offered all this. He's like, oh, I can kill Thanos. I can win. Like, oh, hold on.
Well, they do that twice in episode 6. I feel like they do it with the Miss Minutes or whatever, and then they have He Who Remains try and do the same thing. I feel like they just offer them.
Yeah.
He Who Remains
It was better whenever they did it with Miss Minutes. Is all I was going to say. Go ahead.
Right.
The Miss Minutes one is you can have all the things that you've wanted.
Right.
But the He Who Remains one is you can have everything that there is to want.
Right. Yeah. Or you can be in charge of this fascist regime that I've created.
You can be the boss of everything.
Yeah. Y'all can be the benevolent fascists.
But they're both the same storytelling device, right? The character is offered everything they ever wanted and has to make the moral decision to turn it down for the greater good. Like, that's like a trope that there's. And then my point is that they do it twice, and then I liked it better the first time, I think.
Well, yeah, but I guess like to lean to John's point, to borrow another thing, like the first one is being allowed to be put back in the Matrix. Like, you're not aware of the sort of
they are
fascist dictatorship. Like your Cypher being like, no, I don't want to play this game anymore. I just want to eat steak and live and not worry about anything. Like, make me a battery again. Yeah.
And it's also
becoming.
And that first one is also like, here's all the stuff that you wanted before you grew, right? Because we've,
the better. Yeah.
No, it's better. Kind of, but it's also like functionally different within the story, I think, The Miss Minutes offering it to him is, here's all the things that you wanted before you developed and grew to be, who you are now. And then he goes, no, I don't want that because it's fake, right? But then when He Who Remains does it, it's, listen, there is one way this world functions as an organized fascist timeline police state. Any other function is utter chaos and probably total annihilation, and we'll get back to this point that we're at now anyway. So your options are total annihilation or take over everything and kind of get what you still want, right? Which is control. Not subjugation as pretending to be in charge, but control.
Right.
And then he still and then that's the one that gets him to be like, hey, look, no, wait, maybe we should think about this and take the deal. Because it's still, he's grown as a character, but he still is worried more about the annihilation of everything than he is about sticking to his own.
You're right. You're right. I guess you've moved me a little bit, because they are saying different things about his character, right? That Sylvie does not care about the greater good and cares about her particular mission. Maybe she may not want to be like ruler or anything like that. She may be good enough to turn that down, but she's still selfish enough to want to not care about that. You know what I mean? And Loki is like evolved to a point to where not only is he going to turn down like his previous goals in Avengers, but now he's like actually like, no, like I would feel bad if like everybody died.
But I also don't like. I wouldn't say that he's evolved enough. I would say that Sylvie is more emotionally mature than Loki.
She's not, though. It's clear in the last episode.
But so the problem is that the Lokis don't know that what He Who Remains is saying is going to happen is going to happen. So He Who Remains says, the world is going to end unless you allow me to continue, or not unless you allow me, unless you take the reins of this fascist bureaucracy that we've shown you in the previous episodes annihilates entire universes from existence by feeding them to a giant smoke monster at the end of time. Right? Like,
as you do.
So He Who Remains says, look, your options are total annihilation or take over for me. Loki then goes, I'm so afraid of this potential total annihilation that I'm going to take the reins of a fascist monster bureaucracy. Whereas Sylvie is like, I don't know.
That choice to actually take the reins? I feel like all he says, I think as far as male Loki gets, is like, hang on, let's think about this. Don't kill him just yet. And she's like, fuck you, I'm going to kill him right now.
But so here's the problem there then is like, what other information are you going to get?
Yeah. Well, like, they talk amongst themselves, and she didn't even want to have the conversation, it seemed.
Yeah.
Because agreeing to take over a fascist, monstrous bureaucracy is worse than allowing all of civilization to determine it.
Right. Well, that's why I kind of think it depends on how you're like looking at this, whether who you feel like is more emotionally mature. Because on the one hand, like Sylvie is like still motivated by that childhood trauma of being robbed the ability to choose anything about her life.
That's what I got out of it. Not against,
so it's like
she has a problem with fascism. She has a problem with the fascists that wronged her. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. But I do think you can read it like based off what she's saying, that she's like, no, like free will is better than like safety. You know, like sure. You know, the universe, there may be all-out war, but at least people are in control of their own lives. We're not pruning people out of existence because they made a choice that this guy didn't agree with. Like, free will is better, to where Loki's like, I don't know, I kind of believe this guy. It could get really, really bad, you know, like, let's pause, let's talk, let's think.
Is the show manufacturing consent for war, or no? Sorry, regime change by the military? Is that what it's kind of saying? Like, you know, sometimes you got to hate the bad guy says, you know, hate the dictator, but there's order. Hang on one second, let me follow this through. And the bad guy says you got to hate the dictator, but at least there's order. And they make the decision that no, free will for the people is better. So I'm going to go in and kill the leader, even if there's chaos, you know, and then that makes it okay. Is that like a subtle, like, because it's the Disney Corporation I'm thinking about?
I think it would have been, interesting if they had done something about that.
Right, yeah.
But what they end up doing is they end up having our Loki show up back at the TVA and have the TVA just exist in exactly the same way it was, just run by
A different
that
statue.
guy.
Yeah.
So it's like
Well, what it does. I think we've already branched into multiple timelines at that point, because like we have
Owen Wilson
and the Minuteman.
Oh yeah, you're right.
That's
right.
Because like they're standing at like when we see them, like after Renslayer's left and they've started doing stuff, we watch them watch a television where all of the timelines have gone past the point of no return, and like they're aware of what they're doing. But then when we jump into where Loki gets sent, they are unaware that that's happening. They're like, all of these timelines. Like, what does he want to do? Yeah. So it's like, I think right now we've already branched into like, oh yeah, there's all these other timelines. Like they're back.
So when Loki gets sent back and interacts with Owen Wilson, is that just a variant of Owen Wilson, or is that?
Yeah, that would be like if we were going through like just to put it in terms that I can easily deal with. If we were like, we're Rick, like Owen Wilson C-137, right? Is the main one we're following. We've now jumped into another reality with a different Owen Wilson. You know what I mean?
So
not
I
necessarily
like
a variant, but like an entire
Wilson.
different universe that's now coming into existence.
Well, that's what's unclear to me at the last episode is it the same Owen Wilson, except now that version has experienced a different life because they changed, like they moved a leaf in the past, you know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. Or is it that they went back to a different timeline, there's another Owen Wilson, but the Owen Wilson of this show that we spent the whole series with still exists, just in a different timeline because, oh no, I've gone cross-eyed, But
yeah, I think that one.
You know how I interpreted
it?
I interpreted it as what He Who Remains said was going to happen happened. They let all the timelines split. They all went into war with each other, and the one that our Loki ended up in was the after the Time War.
Oh, I don't think that war's happened yet.
No, I don't think either. No.
Yeah, I think we are.
I think that's got to be season 2, right?
Yeah, I think we are in the beginning of like that becoming a thing.
Right.
Because actually, no. Now I'm confused because we're not just like in Earth. We're in another freaking TVA.
Right.
We're in that other fascist dictatorship.
Well, now are there multiple TVAs? Is there just the one TVA? Why does
I think there's going to be multiple TVAs. I think that's why we had an Owen Wilson. Like I think we have 2 of them. But it's like, but like calling them.
I would hope for that to be the thing instead.
Yeah.
Because it seemed to go back on its own logic of time travel in the show whenever that last scene happened. And we still got to talk about He Who Remains because there's a lot to talk about with He Who Remains.
Oh, yeah.
But the last episode or last scene, though, I'm like, okay, so did he go back and change everything to where now, or is he just in one of the multiple universes that is now created? So there's multiple TVAs. I hope it's that because I think that's more interesting for a season 2.
Yeah, that's how I read it. Was we're now we're in a different timeline, a different universe.
But it's a fun. Isn't that? Have you guys seen the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes movie?
Yes.
Years ago.
Is that does something similar happen at the end of that movie where I know it's not the same cliffhanger as the ending of the original, but it's like a similar concept.
Oh, you mean when Mark Wahlberg goes back to Earth and there's like a chimp Abraham Lincoln monument?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what they do in the show, right?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah,
Can I find that real quick? Can you guys talk amongst yourselves for like 2 seconds while I find that? No, go ahead.
I'm still trying to wrap because it is weird because it's like almost, again, to use Rick and Morty, it's just a way to sort of like easy jumping off point. It's almost as now we've said, not only are there multiple universes, but there's multiple citadel of Ricks that are all run by different Rick councils, Like, so, I don't know. Did we already go through a time war for this guy to be in charge of the TVA? Or does this guy create a time variant authority in every universe, and then once he's done that, realize there are multiple universes, and then try to bring all of those into control? Because I guess technically, if you have time travel, you could have a TVA that's keeping track of just time travel in that one locked off universe that doesn't have to then be trying to stop all the different like branching stacked universes.
But they're run by that guy, so they're going to be trying to police the other time universes, right?
Right, but what I was guess is like when he first tells that story with all the little guys on his table, is the beginning step to discovering other universes, establishing a control of like that one universe's flow of time, to where he's in charge of a TVA, and then realizing that like, oh, all of my other variants have also done this, and some of them are like, wow, we're gonna annihilate everyone, so we gotta fight. And some of them were, I guess more benevolent rulers. So they're like, yeah, we can work together and share technology across our time variant authorities.
Oh, wrong one. Still figuring this out.
That's okay.
There we go.
But,
right. Can you hear it?
Yes.
So. Yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, at the end of the Planet of the Apes, I guess I could make it full screen. Why not? It's like literally the same ending, isn't it? I'm gonna get copyright striked in 3.
Yeah. Oh,
that whole movie is wild.
Yeah. It's the same.
Oh man, I haven't seen this in forever, but yeah, basically
because it's not good.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it's one of those where it's like, do I want to watch it again because of it's so like weird and bad?
Yeah.
But yeah, it is basically that we get that ending to where it's like, oh no, I've wound up in a different reality.
It's a fun trope, like, oh no, I'm now where the bad guys, win. Or it's kind of not the ending, but it's a fun part of Back to the Future Part 2. Also, the second season. Oh my god, the second season is going to be Back to the Future Part 2. Kind of. That's kind of fun.
Everything with time travel is just Back to the Future.
Although
that was my favorite part of Endgame, where Endgame was like Back to the Future Part 2, except that, like how you go back to the first movie, but like you're like, you got to make sure the other characters don't see you, from the first movie. That's fun.
I know. It was fun.
Okay.
I was thinking it's going to be interesting to see. Well, yeah, we can talk about Hero Race, but like I'm curious now about how they're going to do a season 2, because we're going to have to meet. Like this character is supposed to be in the next Ant-Man movie as well.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, we're gonna have some movies that kind of continue to establish whatever the next Avengers level threat is gonna be, which is gonna be this guy. But like, is season 2? I mean, I guess it will still be in the TVA, but it's like I was rewatching the last episode. I was like, oh, okay, so our next round of Avengers are like Scarlet Witch, Falcon and new Captain America and the Winter Soldier, and then I guess Loki kind of is now going to be on the team. Like, is he going to show up? In
That'd
some
be funny
way?
If they replace Thor with Loki.
Yeah, I mean, because that's kind of where we're back to the beginning where we're like on the chessboard setting up our new players, for their multiple year movie arcs all happening over all these different stories. So it's like it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, we got another 20 years of the second string Avengers.
Marvel forever. No, I don't think that's going to be a 10-year arc this time, because like again, they don't have to do as much groundwork. You know what I mean? They've already done all of that, so they can.
I guess that's true.
Do this over
the
like
second half
4
of the
or 5
first
years.
round of Avengers. So the second 5 years was the first 5 years of the second round of Avengers.
Yeah, I know, right.
I bet the Kang storyline will only be probably 5 years or so, into the next 2 or 3 movies.
What do you do after that, though? The guy has Infinity Stones in his
as paperweights.
Right, as paperweights in his bureaucracy's office. Who is the villain after this guy?
Absolutely correct, John. The thing that they should do after something like the Avengers Endgame is something like Black Widow. Yeah, something like Black Widow, which is one character story. It's not the end of the world. Well, it's kind of. I mean, he does plan for world domination in that movie, but it means a lot to her. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean a lot necessarily to everybody on the team. It means a lot to her, though, and I think that's a really great way to go for your shows and movies going forward. But what they're doing with this show and with the multiverse of madness and all that stuff is they're going even bigger. We had the whole galaxy at stake last time. Well, let's have the whole
small
multiverse.
Potatoes.
Yeah.
One universe worth of people. Now we're going to destroy infinite universes worth of people.
Not only are we going to destroy infinite universes, but we've already destroyed infinite universes.
Right. Yeah,
and we're going to destroy another infinite universe.
Yeah.
So, and how do you go back to saving the block? Saving your town, saving your neighborhood.
Well, it's
that's what Spider-Man's supposed to be, and even his next movie is going to deal with like multiverses and shit.
I think honestly we can't do that. I think sort of like thinking that we can't. Oh, how do we go back to like small stakes? It's like we just make them personal. You know what I mean? Like
right.
That's like I heard someone describe it. I forget what movie it is, but there's a scene in a movie where they're like robbing a jewelry store. Like, like small time crooks, but also one of the characters is in there looking for a watch that his wife liked, and so like they're like in the middle of this. It's like something I haven't seen in forever, but it's like they're in the middle of this heist, and they've already stolen the jewels they want, but they only have a small amount of time, but he hasn't found that watch yet. And like that moment is so tense. Because you're like, no, dude, you got to leave. But I get why you're trying to do this. It's like I think you can do that type of moment if you write it correctly and the motivations are there. That where the stakes are very small, but the tension is still there. Like we don't need universe-ending stakes because then at that point it almost becomes so big. You're like, well, if we're blowing up reality and all realities of all realities of all realities, it's like what? I'm a minuscule speck compared to that. Like what? Like this isn't that insane to me. Like you need that more human. Like this guy's making an irrational decision, but like for a rational reason type of thing. So it's like I think we can get that with all these superheroes.
I mean,
obviously not right. Yeah, right. I think all of that is possible. It's like no, just like tell a human story, tell a little thing. Like you can have like the crazy fighting and all that stuff, but like if at the same time, like say like Falcon, or whoever, it's like they're fighting in this big thing, but there's like a piece of something that they're irrationally connected to from like a human motivated reason that can then become more like tense because like, the stakes are very small, but like it's important to that character.
Right.
So I think like we can easily go and tell these smaller scale stories, but yeah, we'll see if they try to. Because now we've got universe on top of universe on top of universe.
That's what I would hope that they would do is go in the smaller direction. Not because like there was a scene in Black Klansman. Have you guys seen the movie Black Klansman?
Long time ago.
Yeah. There's a scene where Adam Driver, who plays a Jewish character, is undercover in the context of the story. He's undercover trying to infiltrate like a white supremacist organization, and one of the white supremacists is trying to give him a lie detector test to try and figure out like he's just trying to interrogate him, because he suspects that he's Jewish. And it's just two people in a room. The world isn't at stake. But I was like more invested in like the stakes of that scene than I have in a lot of the last few Marvel movies. Or even, go back to Joker. That last scene in Joker, the climax of that movie is he goes on a talk show and kills a guy. But it's like super intense. Yeah. And the world doesn't have to be at stake. It's just a crazy thing that happened. Within the context of the story, it's a crazy thing that happened in New York one night. So like,
which like if you go back to the first Avengers movie, I think what is fun about that movie is less like the tension of the end. I don't even think when we saw it there was much tension that they were going to lose to Loki. Yeah, it's like them coming together, and then the last bit once they've come together and we get the iconic like wraparound shot of the Avengers. Then, like, one of my favorite ways I heard it described, I think it was Bob Chipman, where he's like, now it's just a fireworks show. Like, we've spent, like, 4 to 5 years setting this up, and now we're just gonna have fun. We're just going to let everyone jump around, have cool moments, like, we've earned this as Disney. Or, we're just going to put nothing but spectacle on screen. And then, okay, cool, we'll turn off the blue laser and, save the day. But it's like all of the tension of that was how are these groups going to come together? Not so much, oh, my God, I can't believe the world's about to end.
The first Avengers movie is really well constructed in terms of like, that whole shield helicarrier, the middle act or whatever, with Loki on the helicarrier and imprisoned, and he gets the Avengers to betray each other and kind of start fighting, and then them coming together. Yeah, you're right. He's like the film's not great. I'm just echoing your point. The film's not great because Loki is a badass villain. It's great because the plot is so perfectly constructed to make every character come together and be shown off in just the right way. It's a good fucking movie. I just rewatched it the other day.
I know that one. It's fun. So good.
I like Infinity War because of it's also a bunch of build up and everything and payoff. But like the Avengers movie is just a really well, and it's not it's not as big high stake. I mean, it's ironic to say, but it's not as high
it's
stake.
It's crazy to think back to when we were all unsure if that was going to work. I know this point's been beaten to death throughout the internet forever, but it is still funny to watch it and be like, yeah, there was a little while where like, oh man, like 6 main characters, that's too many. How can you do that?
So guys,
20 movies.
Yeah, well, it pays off. DC has shown that it pays off to do it the Marvel way, I guess. But so He Who Remains. I just got to say this. I got to get through this because you guys got me wanting to talk about Black Widow for a second now. In a second, but He Who Remains, I'm not a big fan of because it just reminds me of the Mandarin twist in Iron Man 3, where the whole twist is what if the villain was really underwhelming? Bet you wouldn't see that coming. And it's like, I bet you expected something cool. What if we made him not cool, And I'm like, it's just a guy. And then so initially I'm disappointed, right? Because it's supposed to be Kang the Conqueror. And then the character is literally like the most annoying character throughout that I've seen in television in 2021, I think, so far. His mannerisms of the way he talks and like the way that the whole episode doesn't help. The whole episode is him expositing dialogue, Like the whole episode is centered around him giving off exposition. And the way, I don't know if it's the direction or if it's the actor, Jonathan Majors, who I've heard is like a really good actor and a lot of other things. He did say in an interview that he is a classically trained clown and that helped with his role. I'm serious. And that helped with his performance here in the show. And I'm like, I totally see it because he's being super fucking goofy and whimsical and in a way that doesn't. It's like Pennywise before the dark part happens in the It movies, but you never get that dark part though. So he's not an intimidating presence. He's annoying, if anything. And again, the twist of the show is I was expecting something cool like Loki, like alternate version Loki, or a bunch of other things. And it's just kind of what if it's not any of that cool stuff and it's just a guy who's annoying. So I just didn't like Kang. And then also everything that has to do with free will of this show in this show is episodes 1 through 5 ruined again because the guy says everything you've done is because I paved the path.
Y'all just walk down it and you're like, oh yeah, that is something that
it was so disappointing.
Going back and forth on
5 and I was like, okay, cool, here we go. And then no.
Exactly. I don't know. It's interesting. I didn't have the same the sort of hatred of Kang, or He Who Remains. For me, I was like, okay, interesting. It's like trying to, again, wrap my brain around the context of what world do we exist in now? What are character arcs?
Right.
What are, ends of a show? To where it's I think Loki and Sylvie, our main characters, we got to see sort of contained arcs that will then grow somewhere else. And then, okay, now we've met what will be the future big bad of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And at the same time, underwhelming, but also clearly very powerful, at least if you believe what he's saying, or I did go and watch a few things about the history of Kang the Conqueror. Cause I haven't read all of the comics and I knew of this character a little bit, but didn't know how much was this new controlling all the multiverses. Was that what they did in those versus, what all does he do? But so it's on one hand, I didn't hate the guy's performance. I thought it was an interesting choice to do that, to have this guy who's so powerful that he's oh, I'm not worried about what y'all are going to do. I'm here chilling. I'm going to eat my apple and be a little bit crazy because I've lived alone for eons. That's kind of how I read it. But
I guess fucking apple. Oh my god!
I know. I was just because it's become that thing in media where it's oh, you want your character to look like an asshole.
Hang on.
I can't believe they gave him the apple. It was so on the nose.
First of all, I really liked He Who Remains.
I hated him.
I like the idea of the big bad villain not being a Thanos, I control all, fear me type of
could have been
cliche. You mean if it had been one of those types of things?
That could have been fine, but what they ended up going with could have been fine too. But then they had him be the most annoying character I've ever met in my life. So
I liked him. I didn't find him annoying. He had mannerisms that were clearly supposed to be annoying to the characters within the show, but I as the viewer saw those as being good things because he would be obnoxious as shit to the characters in the show. because Loki and Sylvie are all like their whole purpose so far. This whole show has been to find who's at the top and fuck them up so they can have their free will back, right?
Right.
And so to find out that, hey, this whole journey that you've been on, I was still controlling you. And then to have him be like, but now, at this moment, I do not know what will happen because I have given you the choice. I have chosen to give you the option. And I don't know what's going to happen. And that's pleasurable to me, who has been in control for so long, because I feel that I have to. Secondly, the apple thing I really liked, because the have your character eat an apple so that they look like an asshole thing is absolutely a trope, right? But usually it's like a red apple, right? And in this one, it's a green...
Unless you're Captain Barbossa in Pirates of the Caribbean.
Does he eat a green apple also?
He eats a green apple. Yeah. Thank you very much.
So I think that that's also super cool. Because
Barbossa does it better, yeah.
Okay, the red apple, right? A red apple is tasty and sweet, and you don't eat it in front of people because how are you supposed to talk while you eat one of those things, right? You can't. But the green apple for Barbossa is really good because for Barbossa, I can't actually taste this thing. So the fact that it's sour doesn't matter. Well,
it's also showing when he comes back for real that he can taste again. Like that's why they used it in Pirates a couple times. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But when he's telling in the first one, when he's explaining that he can't feel or taste or any of that stuff, he's eating a green apple, right? And it doesn't matter that it's sour.
Right.
He's eating something. Yeah. He's intentionally eating something bitter because it doesn't matter because he can't taste it. And in this, with He Who Remains, he's not only is he intentionally eating a sour apple, but also he'll like take a bite and then it'll cut away from him and then it'll cut back and it'll have more apple in it. I don't know if you guys noticed that or not, but like
it was a
filling apple.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. So there would it's like so. Okay, so here's a ball, right? He'd have like a bite out of this part, and then he'd take a bite out of this part.
Yeah.
But then it would cut away from him, and then when it cut back, there'd be a bite out of this part again, and he'd take a bite out of this part. But at no point was there a bite on the other end. So I'd have to rewatch it to make sure, but I got the impression that he was like eating in a perpetual green apple.
Yeah,
and then
I
don't know if it's actually intentional, but I like that if it is.
Well,
right.
Yeah, but I saw it as a connection to Doctor Strange, like when he first is messing with the time stone. He's got the green apple that he's like rolling back and forward through time. I thought, like just again connecting all of those different things, like the Easter eggs, the stuff. I don't want to sound too much like those channels that I dislike sometimes, like New Rock Stars, where they're like somebody sneezes on camera and they're like, oh, that means that Iron Man actually traveled through time to do all this, and you're like, what? Yeah. Why are we? This is too much. But I do think it was like a nice reference to the Doctor Strange and how they're all gonna be. I love how
you're like, I don't like try and get too into the references.
I know, yeah, but I'm like, that's how I was like, I'm gonna do the thing that I hate, but I do think it is that.
I also think that having him eat the green apple was interesting because He Who Remains, when he's explaining what he's doing, right? When he's explaining like, oh well, I'm Time Hitler, right? When he's explaining all of that, he's like, I have to. Because if I don't, then versions of me that are worse than me will do worse things. Right. So I have to do this thing that 100% admittedly is bad, but it's a necessity in order to maintain order and control. Right. And that logical reasoning for doing that is very bittersweet, right? It's sour. It's I don't want to do this thing, but I have to do this thing because it's better than not doing this thing.
This ties into the apple?
Yeah, because he's choosing to eat a sour apple. He's intentionally eating the bittersweet version of the fruit.
Is John really hates green apples, and the only reason
I actually love green apples. I love sour apples. They're so much better than red apples. But I'm also a cynic, so maybe it means something.
It's all connected.
I prefer
anything means anything in any of these things. That's all I want. All I want is for my media to mean something.
have some stakes. And,
which is my problem with episode 6, because again, I was watching this thinking it was its own contained story,
and now it can just go on forever.
Right, and so all of the what does Mobius do about the fact that he was complicit within a fascist organization? What does Minuteman whatever do about the fact that she's pruned a fuckload of people, and now is realizing that all of those people were just people? Like, there's all of these threads that have to do with these side characters that could just go on forever because we need to keep making a show, which is why I stopped watching Cobra Kai. Yeah. Because I don't know if you guys have seen Cobra Kai.
No.
So it's a show based off of Karate Kid, the Karate Kid movies.
Right. Yeah.
And the Karate Kid movies are all, they're their own movies, their own stories about, generally speaking, kids overcoming the negative social conditioning that parents put on them in order to be better people than their parents are, basically.
Yeah.
And the Cobra Kai show starts off suggesting that it's going to be like that. It's going to be that sort of examination for the guy who's the bad guy in Karate Kid 1.
Karate Kid, right. Yeah.
And so it implies, and then they bring in Danny from Karate Kid, and they say, oh, look, he's an adult now, and he's got failings and flaws, and he's maybe forgotten some of his teachings from Mr. Miyagi, and he has to reconnect with martial arts to figure that out and deal with it. But then, because it's just a show that's never ending, by the end of season 3, they're all making the same exact mistakes and do the same decisions.
So that's my fear.
They learned weren't the right choice in the previous seasons.
Is Mobius going to have the same arc next season? And that's why I hope, going off of what me and Alex were talking about, that's why I'm hoping that this is just a variant of Owen Wilson, and that the Owen Wilson that we know from this series is still out there and hasn't had his mind wiped or whatever, because otherwise we're just going to have to go through that whole character development again, which is frustrating.
I think that the version of Mobius that we know from season 1 is definitely going to still be out there and is going to show up. I think my worry is that they're just going to drop that thread, right? Because they have a scene where Sylvie, I think, is talking to Mobius.
Yeah, when they're talking in episode 5, I think. Yeah, and you and I were talking about this a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So Sylvie is like, you did terrible things. You worked for the TVA and you did fucked up stuff. And Mobius, Mobius doesn't even say sorry. Mobius is just like, when you were fighting my fascist bureaucratic organization, you also killed people.
Yeah,
he does say
you killed my friends.
Right, and so it's like
y'all were all working for
exactly. You were literally Nazi soldiers, basically.
Hunting me down.
Yeah, right. I'll buy into that because he's still on a journey to a degree.
Sure,
right?
But the problem is going to be if they just stop it there. If season 2 comes in and he's like, I've explained that I'm not a part of the fascist organization anymore.
And I'm trying to subvert it now.
Right. You and I are exactly the same, Sylvie. No, Mobius, you're not exactly the same.
Right.
And, going into season 2, they could drop all that stuff and just be like...
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I hope that they don't, but they probably will, because they probably don't want to interrogate too deeply that sort of following orders bad guy.
God forbid the media in the United States of America critically analyze complicit involvement within fascist oppressive power structures.
Yeah, truly.
Yeah. That's why another thing is I would have liked, even perhaps if there was just no, what about this? There's no Kang, and it's just the bureau, the timekeepers are still robots, but they're just the TVA is a lie, and that's just the whole thing is about
TVA down is the self-sustaining lie that there is no big bad in charge
Somebody
of the TVA.
Somebody built the robots and put them there then just pieced out.
Back the original humans that created. I don't fucking know. Come up with that sense of underwhelming, but it's it's more about what you're talking about, being critical of power structures. Instead of being because you can still write it off as if you get rid of Kang, then everything's solved. It's not a problem with a larger I guess social dynamic. You know,
And then
that'd be way more fascinating.
I think
it would be really fascinating. But then it would have to not only be a standalone story in its own self, it would also have to be standalone from the entire MCU too.
How so?
Right.
Well, because then they wouldn't be able to introduce Kang as the big bad for the Avengers.
Just introduce him in another thing, and find a different actor, and then go with a different portrayal, and then introduce him in something different. I don't know.
I'm going to reserve until because it's like with all this stuff. I'm going to reserve how I feel about Kang completely until I see him as like a full-on bad guy, as opposed to sort of what I would feel is like the end. Like we've met him at the end of his arc. At the beginning, you know what I mean? Because we're dealing with the time travel thing. Yeah. Like we've met him as like, oh yeah, I've destroyed everything. I've been alone. I'm ready to I'm pulling the Willy Wonka. I'm ready to give the chocolate factory to somebody else. Y'all have passed the test. All the other Loki children have died because they, tried to drink the fountain. But, like y'all are here. You can do it. And they're like, nah, man, I'm gonna kill you and give free will. And he's like, okay, then we'll play this tune again. He's like, he's so old and powerful that he's over it. But
somebody said that like, oh well, because this is a variant, he's going to be very different when he returns in another movie or whatever. And I'm like, well, thank you.
Yeah, I think he can be similar and different. I think like the sort of
you can take the best of right.
Right. Yeah. I'm
every movie. You could have like 5 or 10 Marvel movies where Kang is the bad guy, but it's a different Kang every time.
Be cool.
Yeah.
This is like the
you really could.
Like the
there's so many. Yeah.
I mean, they're not going to do that, but it would be cool if they did.
I think to a degree they will, though. I think maybe not go so far as having a different actor play him or anything like that. But like, I bet he'll look slightly different. Like maybe I don't know. Yeah, maybe.
My thinking is they'll do a bunch of
like guy. That'd be
like what I would expect is that within Loki season 2, they'll do a bunch of different versions of Kang. And then within the MCU proper, they'll have one version of Kang that's like...
Yeah.
I was going to predict in season 2, Kang's not going to appear again until the last episode again.
You think?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think they're going to show him a lot. I think they're going to have him go on this whole other journey again.
Yeah, I think it'll depend for me. Or it'll depend on like is season 2 coming out next year, or is season 2 a thing that will happen sort of tangentially to the MCU for a while? Like that's sort of what I'm curious about, because again, like with how Marvel's telling stories now, it's like we get sort of like a character arc in a season, but like the overall story is told over multiple properties and medias, So it's like it's hard to like figure out what we're gonna see and where. So it definitely will be interesting because if Loki season 2 is sort of the build up to the next big sort of event movie where there's multiple characters, then I would think we would see Kang more throughout it, or the different versions of Kang to get to like Kang Prime or whatever, the big bad version. But if it's like coming out next year, then potentially we could just have another sort of thing where we're getting a Mobius arc. We're trying to reconnect Loki and Sylvie across different universes, and Kang is in it some, but not a whole lot. So, I think there's multiple ways they could go with the how often we're going to see Kang and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, here's hoping. I tried my battery went out. Oh, there it is, and it's back. Awesome, cool.
Nice.
I did that so discreetly. I was like nailing that.
Yeah, I was like, oh no, where did he go?
No, I love handling it until I brought us out of the fourth wall or whatever. So what are you guys' final in closing? If you have to make a closing argument, Your Honor, about Loki season 1.
I mean, overall, maybe in my older age, I've just become like less critical. I'm like, overall, I enjoyed it. It was fun. I like the character of Loki. I like the little journey that he got to go on. Again, not perfect, but interesting to see it done in one contained series as opposed to him being a side character in multiple properties, and that. So it was nice to sort of see that arc. And again, like I enjoyed Sylvie. I enjoyed Mobius. He was my favorite. And I'm interested to see where it goes in the context of everything. But I don't know. I guess not my favorite of the new MCU shows. I think WandaVision is still my favorite of the new stuff.
Yeah.
But I liked it, and I liked that it didn't go as weird as I wanted based off the previews. You know, I was hoping there was going to be more stuff like Loki being DB Cooper and like playing with different realities and him like jumping around. Like this like did the weird stuff it promised me in like the first 2 episodes, and then was just very straightforward. Yeah, 5 also. Yeah, those were my favorite parts. I wanted more weird and just like having fun as opposed to, you know, some of the more straightforward stuff that we got. But I would say, yeah, like, you know, pretty good. Yeah, I'll watch season 2. Yeah, I had fun.
You will watch
season 2. Yeah.
Okay, I'm curious, John. Will you watch season 2, and what do you think of season 1 so far, or in retrospect?
So season 1 of Loki, I think, was entertaining. It was, you know, it's one of those shows that I like enjoyed, but I wouldn't be like, oh, I want to watch this again right away. And it's also not something that I go to my friends and I'm like, oh, Loki was super good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I probably would not seek out to watch season 2 just because I'm a cynic and I imagine that it's not going to do, like, I imagine it'll end up like Cobra Kai did.
Right.
Cobra Kai was such a bummer for me because the first season was so cool and the second season was like, this could still be super cool. And then the third season was, okay.
So you saw the decline. Yeah.
Right. But I'm also sure that at some point you, Sam, will probably be like, John, do you want to talk about Loki season 2? And I'll be like, yeah, I guess I might as well watch it.
Was it just 6 episodes?
Right. Is it just another 6 episodes? Is it possible for me to get it without paying Disney? Yeah. Okay, then sure, maybe I'll watch it. You know what I mean?
Right.
If you're sailing the high seas, you can find it. I hear.
Wink.
Wink.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think episode 2 and episode 5 are really fun. I love the DB Cooper sequence in episode 1. I think I love it. I think that's so fun. I think
it's not historically accurate to the actual story of DB Cooper.
Don't give a shit.
If you're gonna make Loki DB Cooper, make it real DB Cooper.
I think it's so funny because like of all the people I talked to, everyone's like roughly aware of DB Cooper, so they all had a lot of fun with that thing. And then John's like, no, it was wrong. And I'm like, what are the details that they did? Like, all I know is that he jumped out with a bunch of money and like all this stuff. Like, yeah, I know. It's hilarious. I was like, I didn't know John was such a Cooper head.
Oh my god! It was a fun sequence. In retrospect, it had nothing to do with the rest of the series. It was a weird Family Guy style cutaway.
It was something,
and that's why I was like, the trailer like made me excited. Like it showed the different Lokis, the DB Cooper scene, and I was like, oh, we're gonna get this weird,
also
time jumpy.
Yeah. I was disappointed that President Loki wasn't our Loki. He was a variant. I was expecting in the trailers that our variant version we were following was going to try and take over at some point and be President Loki. And we find out that President Loki, I like with how they used him to show like his shadow self kind of and his flaws. But still, it was a little bit disappointed because again, I was we're going to get a Loki standalone show. So not knowing anything else, just going into a Loki standalone show, I'm like, we're going to get to see Loki to his fullest extent. And he seems like he's a wimp, so I don't know. The show will never.
I know. It's like as we were talking, I was like, man, whoever edited the trailer knew exactly what everyone wanted to see from the show.
And that's what's frustrating.
Yeah, it's like because like all of that stuff was really cool, and it was put together in this way to where in my head it was like a weird kind of out there show, like just like getting crazy, like the best parts of Doctor Strange, you know, and Thor Ragnarok, just like the colorful, the weird, and then that was not enough of the show for me. Like I still had fun, you know. Again, like I'll watch Tom Hiddleston be Loki any day of the week. He's great, but overall, it's like, nah, man. I want to get weird. It reminds me of, although this was better than that, like Hobbs and Shaw. The trailer promised me this just like ridiculous thing, like almost as crazy as like Crank, but in the Fast and Furious universe.
Yeah, no.
So I was like, this one might be fun to see, and then I saw it, and it was just
dog shit.
Like it was fine, you know, like it was whatever. But I also was so mad because like it was like okay, whatever. I'm not overly angry that this movie exists. I'm just mad that the trailer lied to me. You know what I mean? Like if you're into Fast and Furious, maybe you like this, but like I don't care. And I was expecting just insane, like The Rock pulling a helicopter out of the out of the sky, just over the top fun. And then it wasn't that. It was just like Jason Statham and Dwayne Johnson said, "Oh, I want to do all this stunts Tom Cruise does in Mission Impossible, but like with green screen instead of actually doing them." And that's all I saw was just like, okay, yeah, I've seen Tom Cruise do literally everything in this movie, but practically for the most part and better. And then I just saw a bunch of CGI artists create. So it's like that was a similar feeling to where it's like I was promised something weirder and cooler, and then it wasn't that completely.
I think Loki. I mean, Loki probably fits that bill pretty well. I can say I love the music. The music throughout the whole show was fire. I love that.
Yeah,
shit.
There's lots of parts of this show that were like I was like, oh, this is great.
There's a lot of good pieces. Yeah,
there were other parts where it's like, oh, okay, still guys, Disney. We're taking calculated risks as opposed to getting weird.
That's what's frustrating. Is you're never going to see something too crazy from Disney.
Yeah.
John?
Have you guys seen Legion?
Haven't seen Legion.
No, I want to though. I hear it's.
You should watch Legion. I liked it.
I started it. It's on FX, right? And you can watch it through Hulu, I think. But I started it and I never really followed through, just because I don't know. I mean,
it's
at the time.
It's one of those like it feels to me like the sort of thing that you're describing, Alex, where you want like weird like time jump, like alternate universe.
Yeah, I can see that for sure.
Because the main character is a mutant with the ability to alter reality.
Oh, he's like related to Xavier, right? Isn't he?
I think so, but I'm not 100% on that.
But he's got similar, mind type of shit going on with his
but also he can't control it because he's got a bunch of like mental health issues.
Like Aubrey Plaza is in that show and stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
Like she plays like a mental health patient.
I might have to check this out.
She plays like a friend of his who he manifests in his brain. It's really weird, and it's been a while since I've seen it, but it's like kind of like what you're describing.